Okay, and we are live. I am broadcasting today from Buffalo, New York, at the Shrimp Castle, and today I have a very special guest. Major Jeffrey Prather is a retired Army officer, ex-DEA special agent, former DIA intelligence officer turned whistleblower, and then targeted by the government. He's also a master martial artist and former federal primary firearms instructor. He served in special operations, federal law enforcement, and intelligence, and has trained tens of thousands in tactical firearms training. In addition to hosting his own call-in weekly talk radio show called The Prather Point, he is also a martial arts master and teacher, Apache wisdom teacher, kinetic quotient creator and trainer, firearms and horsemanship instructor, published author, Screen Actors Guild film actor, speaker, father, husband, and chaplain. And Mr. Prather is available for one-on-one mentoring, group training, interviews, speaking engagements, and corporate team building events. And I hope to get to all of this in my hour here with Major Prather. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And I just want to welcome you, Mr. Prather, and thank you again for sharing some time with me today. I'm looking forward to learning from you.
Thanks for that great commercial. And sorry I haven't gotten back to you sooner. I didn't mean to put you on the back burner. I'm really thankful that you're so interested and involved in what's going on in the world and in the country.
Oh, yeah, no problem, Mr. Prather. I really appreciate you chatting with me today. And lots I want to ask you about. Firstly, I actually wanted to start with kind of where you grew up. And then I also was wondering if you were enlisted or commissioned, because you were in the Army, and then like where you were stationed too, because that stuff always interests me. Whatever you're comfortable talking with, of course.
I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm out of St. Joseph's Orphanage. I'm a product of rape, and I was adopted by a wonderful family. Got really blessed and lucky. Eventually, I found my birth mom. My wife found my birth mom, and she was from Comanche, Oklahoma Indian Territory. So that's kind of the connection back to native stuff. And I was commissioned. I'm an ROTC commissioned out of Ohio State when I was getting my master's degree. I got my 2 bachelors from the U of A, but I was in law school, got in a big fight, and that's what got me into ninjutsu from karate. And I left law school, came to my senses, and got my ROTC commission and went into the Army, and really enjoyed my time. So I had gotten to go to airborne school as a cadet, and because I was airborne and because I was military intelligence, I was able to go into SOCOM, Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, right away. And that's how I got to go into PSYOPs, because I spoke Spanish. I'd worked in South America before. So PSYOPs is part of SOCOM, Special Operations Command, because it's a force multiplier. PSYOPs, SEAL Affairs, Rangers, Special Forces, SEALs are all SOCOM elements. And so I got to attach to them a lot and deploy. And that's how I eventually made my way over to 7th Special Forces Group and eventually to the DEA.
Okay, wow. So how long were you in the military before you transferred to being a DEA agent? Because you actually wrote a book, a fiction book based on your experiences near the South border, didn't you?
I did, yeah. That was supposed to be a movie with my friend Wes Studi, the Cherokee Vietnam vet, who's just got an Academy Award, and Val Kilmer. It didn't happen, so I changed it to a book. But I left active duty in 1990. I was in Panama getting ready for the Panama invasion. And I walked over and saw another captain. I was a captain then, and, Special Forces do a lot of training, and they were training a long-haired team of civilians. And I thought it was CIA, and it turned out that it was DEA Operation Snowcap. And so I met those guys, and I met the head of Snowcap, and Snowcap was the DEA's paramilitary organization to go work with host nation police and military to interdict cocaine. And so they snapped me up pretty quick, and that's how I became a DEA agent.
Okay. Okay. Wow. And let's kind of transfer to the present here, Major Prather. What's your take on COVID? How dangerous do you think the virus itself is? And what has your experience been throughout this whole pandemic? Because we've all had quite a unique year so far, all of them slightly different, but all sharing a common denominator as well. Yeah. So what has your year been like, and what's your take on where we are today?
Well, I work in competitive intelligence and corporate security now. In fact, I was just on. That's why I was a little bit late tuning in with a client. And so I work in biotech. That's one of my websites. GRIN is genetics, robotics, information, and nanotechnology are the four cusp areas that are changing so fast. They're changing the technology. They're changing. There's no laws for them. There's no regulation. And so early on, it was very clear to me that COVID was a bioweapon, that it was out of Wuhan. I traced that through the FBI indictments of Dr. Lieber at Harvard, who was going to Wuhan to get paid. I held up documents that showed that the foreign cleavages on that SARS strain were different than the others and had HIV indicators on there as well. And so it was very clear early on that it was a bioweapon, that it was released. It was tied into Fort Detrick stuff, and there was a lot of espionage between Detrick and Harvard and Canada and then Wuhan. But the short answer is that it came out of Wuhan. It's a bioweapon. It was released because of, I believe they released it because Trump had negotiated a new trade agreement from a point of strength with China, which changed the dynamic completely. And there was a clause in there that's saying if there's an act of God, we can get out of this agreement. And the other thing Trump had done was he kind of did, I liken it to what Roosevelt did with Japan. Everybody knows about December 7th and Pearl Harbor. But what a lot of people don't know is Roosevelt blockaded Japan, an island. And so have you seen the new movie Midway?
Yeah, I did see it in theaters with my dad, actually.
Great, good. And so that's like the best, most realistic military movie I've ever seen. If you watch the end, you see the guys even look like the real people. And there's the intelligence officer sitting with Yamamoto, who liked us. He planned the attack. He didn't want to fight us. He said, these Americans aren't the pushovers you think they are, but don't push us. It really, the blockade pushed them into it. I'm not making excuses for Japan, although I've trained in Japan since training Japanese martial arts since the 60s, great people. But the same thing that Roosevelt did, because he knew we'd have to come to the aid eventually of Europe. When Japan attacked us, Churchill opened a bottle of champagne. Of course, he opened a bottle of champagne every day, but he really opened a bottle of champagne that day because he's like, if you've ever have you seen Darkest Hour or heard his speech?
Yep. Yeah, I've seen that one as well. Yeah, great film.
And the great thing about that is the end, he says, we'll fight on the beaches, fight in the streets, fighting from the colonies. But the last line is, until in God's good time, the new world comes to save the old. And he's talking about us.
The United States.
Yeah. And so I liken that to what Trump did with China and also with North Korea. Is North Korea is clearly a client state of China. And what was happening was that Trump was historic. I was stationed in South Korea. When those fences came down and those troops shook hands, that's just unbelievable. I mean, he should have got the Nobel Peace Prize for that alone. For those of us who know that, that's still a state of war. And that's really when the deep state is in there, because we don't win. We're not allowed to win. That's the first deep state war, really, because that really reinforces what Eisenhower warned us about, about the military industrial complex, which is now the military industrial entertainment information complex as well. But anyway, Trump was renegotiating with them and he pushed them farther. And so right after that negotiation was complete and signed, that's when you started to see COVID be released in November, December of last year. And, you know, I know other folks like George say it was at the Wuhan games and stuff. And, you know, I'm not sure about that. And there could be different vectors. But the point is that it was a bioweapon. It was released, but it's not really that lethal. You know, I've got stuff up where I'm out on my horse saying, you know, it's the CDC quietly revised their figures down to 9,210 folks from COVID. And if you take New York and New Jersey out, which is where everybody died because Cuomo put the COVID people back in to kill them, just like he likes to, they just passed a law to kill the born. You know, that's a new law they passed. So
for abortion laws?
For abortion passed that. So there's a live birth abortion bill that passed, I believe, in New York. And they were applauded. And one lady was saying, you know, God save New York for doing this. But that's eugenics, because the very young and the very old aren't good workers. They're not good slaves.
Yeah.
And so it's not really very lethal at all. The infection fatality rate is almost nothing, the mortality rate. But it's primarily a psychological operations weapon. And I worked in PSYOPs, and that is to get everybody to do and react and say a certain thing. And the masks are really a metric of that, because the masks don't work. That's proven science. But, you know, in the first Gulf War, we dropped a leaflet. In my day, it was leaflets, and I jumped out with planes with loudspeakers. And then we'd broadcast, and we'd say, hey, if you surrender, you know, we'll treat you good. If you don't, we'll bury you alive. You know, just hold your rifle above your head. And, you know, thousands of guys came out and held their rifles over their head. So that's a metric of how good that PSYOP worked as a force multiplier. And everybody's happy because nobody has to get shot or killed. So that's why it's in SOCOM. So if you take ShadowNet and ShadowGate and the interactive internet applications that Patrick Bergen and all those guys are talking about that Obama used, and then you apply it to, hey, you got to wear a mask, then you see how you can control the population. And of course, the Antifa BLM guys are wearing masks, so that looks like they are with them. And when you're not opposing them, you are with them. So this is a multi-layered, covert World War IV. And I say World War IV because I've got my little Global War on Terror service ribbon from World War III, because global means World War. It's not really, it's primarily an informational psychological war, because after the first Gulf War, the Chinese watched us fight that, and we won it. Again, we win our wars really fast because we have to win them fast, because we know the press is going to turn against us. So the Chinese, we always watch each other fight wars. We always have observers so we can learn from it. And so the Chinese officers who watched us looked at us and go, nobody can take the United States on head on. Nobody. And so we're not going to take them on head on. We're going to do what's called unrestricted warfare. That's a doctrine. And unrestricted warfare means everything from helping us make the movie Midway, because they help finance that, to helping finance Netflix, to having everything made in China, to building islands, to try and get in a blue water aircraft fleet, which they're not very good at, and to soldiers, which they're not very good at either. And so that's what we are engaged in, is this, and also buy off our politicians, because Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, is deeply indebted to China. That's why Biden says, oh, no, China's not the problem. So that's a long answer, but that's kind of a summation of COVID-19 is one piece of unrestricted warfare in mainly economic battle.
And
does that make sense?
Yeah, that is fascinating stuff, Major Prather. And you got me thinking a lot and trying to connect more dots. So it's principally a trade war between China and the United States of America. How do you think player like Russia fits into it? Because they're the other kind of big boy on the global chessboard, would you say?
So it's not primarily a trade war. A trade war is we just want differences in trade.
Mhm.
China thinks in long term because they don't have elections every couple of years. The dictators stay in there and then they give it to their sons. And so they think much longer term. They don't want to, and there's people who say, they're going to invade us and United Nations blue helmets. And that'd be Red Dawn. And after the metrosexual coasts fall, New York and California and all the metrosexuals, every cowboy, Indian, hillbilly, briar, redneck, biker will be behind every rock. Yamamoto said this. He goes, you'll never take over
behind every
America.
blade of grass.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not feasible for them. That would just unite us all. So that's even what happened with the first attack of 9/11. Was they hit the towers and deep state helped them and the Israeli art students helped them, but that unified us because when conditions get more primitive, we become more tribal, and tribal circles unite everybody, doesn't divide everybody. So now they're doing the opposite. Now, you got to stay apart. You got to stay home from school. You got to distance. You got to have masks on. So they've learned their lessons, and they are now dividing us much more significantly and successfully than they did before. But it's not just trade war; it's unrestricted warfare. Russia is not really that great of a power anymore. I went in under Reagan when Reagan built up the military and built up the economy, and Russia collapsed. And what happened was it was taken over by the criminal gangs. Which in many ways are worse. You see all the movies have the Russian, mafia in there, slave trading, sex trading, all that stuff. But they're not really a major nation state power. They're not even as strong as the transnational drug cartels. Wow. That's why, which are really strong and powerful. But that's why the left and all the movies use them. Because if they were really scary, they wouldn't use them. Just like, nobody burns down mosques because they'll be attacked. They go into Catholic masses and stuff because they know they can get away with it.
Right. That makes, wow. That makes sense, Major Prather. I want to ask you about the infamous Jeffrey Epstein, and what are your thoughts on the Epstein saga?
So, this kind of upset a lot of people because I just report the intelligence. And generally speaking, I'm pro-Israel. My wife's family is Jewish. And I say our core American ethics come from our core morals, which comes from our Judeo-Christian and Native morals. Although the natives get short shrift, but everybody's probably familiar with the Judeo, which is 10 commandments, the Christic, which is the 2 commandments. The native is nothing must ever be done to harm the children, and everything is born of woman. If you boil it down, that's the essential Native American warrior values that's in my book. That said, there's a lot of evidence that Epstein was working for Mossad. And people get this wrong. They think Maxwell was working for Epstein. I think Epstein was working for Maxwell because she has more connections right back to Israeli government and Mossad. So did Lex Wexner with Victoria's Secrets. And the reason for that was blackmail. So in the old days, they try and set you up with a hooker. The DOJ even sent this honeypot hooker out to my dojo after they couldn't get me on any charges. They sent this honeypot hooker out, and she's like, "I want private lessons," and it was very obvious, and so we didn't fall for that. But now having an affair is no big deal. Look at Peter Strzok, who was the head of FBI counterintelligence. He's having an affair and texting about it. If he knew anything about counterintelligence, he'd be going, can't do this. He knows nothing about counterintelligence. He knows nothing about operational security. I mean, not only is he totally corrupt, but he's totally incompetent. It's a joke. But that
Where did that honeypot attack come? Like, where's your dojo at? That was in the United States, or?
yeah, it's Tucson. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, showed up. So my dojo's been around for 30 years. But the point is that an affair is not enough to blackmail anybody, but child sexual crimes is. And unfortunately, the intelligence points to that Mossad funded Epstein so that he could, where's all this money come from? Nobody really knows. Well, it comes through back channels, through Mossad, through dark web, which is always weapons, people, and drugs are the dark money channels. And if you think it, whose ever stuff you look at, Fast and Furious with Me or Webs or whatever, you'll see it falls into those three categories. So that's where all the tapes come from. And that goes right to Clinton's, that goes right to Andrew. My sources tell me that somebody from British intelligence came through the vents.
Through the vents? What do you mean by that?
Through the vents in the cell.
Oh, cell. For Epstein. Okay, so you think it was some MI6, MI5 special operative?
That's what my sources say.
Okay.
Because if you look at the royal family right now, there's riots for protest out in front of Buckingham, saying pedos, and they're fading. That whole power structure. And again, that goes back to, I know you know about this. This goes back to the old royalty. It's how World War I starts. This goes back to the Bilderbergs and the Rothschilds and the Khazarians, and continues to go back and back. And there's nothing new about, corruption among the very powerful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Major Prather. Thank you for that. And you definitely taught me some new stuff there. I didn't know that about MI5 or MI6 being the likely, contingent that took them out. Julian Assange is on trial right now. What are your thoughts on the Assange trial and in his whole, story that's unfolding before our eyes now?
Well, I think it's, very hypocritical, because you have Flynn's case, and I didn't work for Flynn. He wasn't the general in charge of DIA when I was there. It was Admiral Jacoby, but the DIA is much less corrupt because it's mostly military guys and gals chapped to the Defense Intelligence Agency. So it's the Pentagon CIA. The CIA is out of Harvard and Yale and State Department. It's all corrupt and it's all deep state and it's a mess, and they're not that competent anyway. When you see Bourne movies, those aren't CIA guys. Those are ex-tier 1 special operators in Ground Branch or in Special Activities Division, SAD Division. I know, I've worked with them. 13 hours, ex-SEALs being heroes. It's
a great movie. Another one.
Yeah, that's a good, realistic. And I know
Michael Bay really outdid himself there. I was very pleasantly surprised. Great soundtrack.
And I bodyguarded Ty Woods' wife. Ty Woods is the ex-SEAL sad guy that gets killed on the and they asked me to do that, and I said, I'll do that one for free. That would be my honor. And she was a lieutenant too, and she got up and started her speech by saying, President Obama called my husband's death a bump in the road. So some of us will never forget that. I say, if you want to, we're Americans, if you want to like Clinton and Obama, that's your right, and I'll respect your opinion. But I've lost too many of my brothers and sisters in military intelligence and law enforcement to ever forgive them for what they've done. But if you want to like them, I'll respect your opinion, but I'm never going to respect them, and I'm never going to shut up about telling the truth.
And you were her bodyguard for a ceremony there for
a freedom event that she came to speak at. I used to do a lot of that.
Wow.
I've done that for Dinesh D'Souza, for Sheriff Walker, for Breitbart, lots of folks.
Excellent. That great info there, Major Prather. Steve Bannon. What are your thoughts on Steve Bannon?
That's another. So I quite didn't finish answering your last question. Is
Yeah, please
the
continue.
left? The left gets away with all this stuff, and then whatever they're doing, they go after the right and prosecute them, like Flynn. Like the Flynn thing should have been dismissed because he was starting to. He said he was going to reform the intelligence community, which is the deep state mainly, and he was not going to give up on Pizzagate till he saw the evidence, which is part of the blackmailing. There's satanic, demonic stuff in there. I can put my chaplaincy hat on and talk about that, but really, for the power hungry who don't believe in God and have no faith, it's a blackmailing. It's a power trip, and it is a blackmailing avenue. But Steve Bannon was, if you recall, I can't think of the guy's name, but he was linking up with a rich Chinese businessman, and he made a statement a while back. And maybe somebody on your comments will remember this guy's name, but he was declaring an alternative government to the communist government of China, and he was making a big announcement about that. And I think it was in front of the Statue of Liberty. And so he was enacting an insurgency in communist China, which is why one of the reasons why China has enacted this Maoist Antifa BLM insurgency against us. And so the deep state then had to go in and silence him. And so that's what all this is about. That's what all this stuff is about. Is I just did on my show the other day, another Minnesotan, pointed a gun at rioters, and they arrested the guy because they own the judicial system for the most part right now, right up to Roberts, Sullivan, Berman, all these corrupt judges. And so they want to control the battlefield. So I doubt if anything will happen to Bannon. It's just, they tried to do it to me for 15 years. That's how, when I started doing this, I started out doing bodyguard, and then I started giving speeches, and then I started predicting, and people were asking me, well, how can you know what's going to happen? I'm like, because they did it to me already. It's a template. They do it to everybody. And they tried to do it to me. I had Eric Holder. I had the DEA going against me. But, they just made up lies. They, back in the day, back in, 2005, 2009, I'm saying Eric Holder's lying about me and the DEA is lying about me and they're changing documents. And everybody's like, sure they are. But now, of course they're lying. We've seen the proof. We've seen Eric Holder perjure himself. We've seen Kleinsmith change documents. We've seen the FISA stuff changed. So it's actually nice for me because everything I said all those years ago has come true.
Yeah, you've been vindicated by the truth. So they started doing this because you started your show? You started your radio show?
No, my story. I became a DEA agent. I graduated from the DEA basic agent class at Quantico at the FBI Academy in 1990. And then I got assigned to Nogales, Arizona, because I spoke Spanish. There's a Nogales, Arizona. There's Nogales, Sonora. That's the epic shipping point. That's the nexus for cocaine and marijuana to come through there. My first big case was 2,000 pounds of cocaine on horseback of 30 horses. It was on U.S. News and CNN. My biggest marijuana seizure was 10,000 pounds. So, because again, that's a dark economy. One of the dark economies is drugs. And the deep state and Congress, and there are a lot of people who are paid off because these transnational drug corporations are bigger and stronger and richer than countries. And they're certainly bigger and richer and stronger than the Drug Enforcement Administration. So, 93, I became a firearms instructor because I learned how to shoot with D-boys at Mott Lake. Doesn't exist anymore, but that was the blue light course before the Delta course. And so then I went snowcap. And so I was a pretty accomplished senior 13. And I got the case to extradite Miguel Caro Quintero. So have you seen The Last Narc on Amazon?
Netflix or Amazon? No, I haven't yet. I just finished El Chapo earlier this year. That was fantastic.
So watch The Last Narc. It is excellent. It's got the guys who grabbed. So you know about Kiki Camarena?
Oh, so we actually just got a question about that. What's Jeffrey think about Kiki Camarena's death?
So Kiki. So anyway, everybody should watch The Last Narc because it's really good. It opened my eyes to stuff I didn't know. And so Kiki was a former Marine. He was a hard charging DEA guy. And the star of that is the true guy, Hector Breyes. And that's the kind of old DEA guys that were hard that I joined. So he hit this big marijuana field down there, which was controlled by the government. And the Mexican Federales police that he was working with kidnapped him at the behest of the kidnappers. They tortured him and they murdered him and they murdered his informant. It was terrible. And there's tons of movies and books and songs, and everybody knows who he is. So that was by Rafael Cara Quintero and his brother Miguel Cara Quintero of the Sinaloa cartel. And so, and I even worked with some of those informants. This was in the 80s, but I came in the 90s. I was still in Central and South America with SF. But I was working on the extradition of Miguel Cara Quintero, brother of Rafael. And they would go into jail there, but it would be a luxury jail. And they would control everything. They paid off everybody. But if we extradited them, then it was a real prison sentence. At least back then it was. So I was working on this extradition. And as I worked on it, I was the government stopped it. And so in 2003, I got called to active duty for the Second Gulf War at the DIA. And so I wasn't handling my informant anymore. And so I'm running at Clarendon there. You can see that photo up there. That's Clarendon. That was the headquarters for Defense Human Service, Human Intelligence. And I had guys at the Pentagon too, and I was over at the Pentagon, and then the DEA headquarters is right across the street, and they called me over, and they said, hey, your informant wants to sue the administrator, which was Michelle Leonard. Before that had been Karen Tandy. And I said, oh, well, she can't do that here. I looked at the paperwork, said, but then I made the mistake of saying, but Tandy and Leonard did destroy my extradition case. Because every time I do something, they would stop it. They would block it. So I went back to my work, and I came off active duty in 2004. And all of a sudden, OPR, which is Internal Affairs, Officer of Professional Responsibility, starts coming after me. And they came after me from 2004 to 2009 when DEA finally fired me without ever having a bad evaluation. All my evaluations were superior. And without ever charging me. And then they wrote a phony report, then they leaked it. It's still out there. People think it's a court document. It's not a court document, but it's exactly the same stuff they did with Flynn that they did with Trump. It's exactly the same stuff. But I had hit upon something I didn't understand at the time, which was that the DEA had a deal with the Sinaloan cartel to run drugs north in exchange for the fast and furious guns going south. So I had also been the DEA liaison to ATF, Tucson. And a lot of people don't know this, but Fast and Furious started at DEA, not at ATF. An ATF task force at DEA in Phoenix started with it. And so I linked up and knew the heroes, whistleblowers, Vince Cefalu, John Dotson, the great agents that tried to stop this from happening and predicted what would happen to Brian Terry. And I've been on a lot of TV and interviews and speeches where I've talked about, Brian Terry, and I know the guys who carried Brian out of the canyon, but people don't understand that, yeah, we were running guns through the ATF and the guns weren't traced. That is, if I did a deal, if I was going to be undercover, not that you'd be better undercover than me, but because I look like the man, I'm the raid guy, but let's say I'm a corrupt military guy and I'm selling you drugs. Well, when you take the coke out and you drive away, I got to get a marked DPS or TPD or Pima County SO vehicle to pull you over. And I got to say, hey, sir, my K9's been sitting in the car all the time. You don't have any drugs or guns in your car, right? And you say, of course not. And I say, well, then you don't mind if I run my canine, right? And you go, of course not. And then the canine hits, I take your drugs, and you don't know that I have got the drugs back. So that's called walling off. Because if I then take you to trial eventually, and I let the drugs go, then your high-speed attorney will say, well, Special Agent Prather, you sold Addy 10 kilos of cocaine, right? Yes, sir. I did. And Addy, what did Addy do? Well, I don't know. What did he do? Well, I guess he sold it. So Addy's a drug dealer. Is that right? Selling coke? Yes, sir. And you sold Addy the drugs, right? And they went onto the street, right? Yes, sir. Okay. Then what's the difference between you and Addy? And the answer would then be nothing. So we have to take those drugs off. We sell them, but then somehow we covertly take them off until I'm ready to arrest you, until I've made like three buys, and then I bust you, and then we send it to the lab, get the reports, and then you go to federal prison for 30 years. But what the ATF did is they just ran guns. They almost ran 3,000 guns. And there was no way to trace the chain of custody. That's not a case. That is covert international gun running. And the ATF is not the CIA. It's a law enforcement organization. And, the last time they did a hit piece on me, they found in Chapo, when they arrested Chapo, they found a Barrett 50 cal, and it was a Fast and Furious gun. Did they use it in the case? No, nothing. When they were doing Brian Terry's murder trial, they had the 2 AKs, and they excluded them from the trial. And so why would you exclude the murder weapons from a murder trial unless you're trying to cover something up? And who's trying to cover it up? The ATF, Eric Holder, and Hussein Obama.
And just for clarification for people who don't know, Fast and Furious was basically an operation where they released guns with the explanation that they would use these guns with the known serial numbers to track them to cartel locations, I guess was their explanation for that.
Well, there was never ever an explanation of how they were what they were gonna do them, because they weren't tracing them. So that, it drives me crazy and I'm so glad, because you're a whippersnapper to me. I'm an old guy now, and it's your country to save or lose. So I'm so glad that you are aware, because I talk to people like, you mean the movie? And I start pulling my hair out, what I got left. But Fast and Furious was the ATF under the Obama administration running guns into Mexico that killed U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. It killed U.S. Customs agent Jaime Zapata. It killed hundreds of Mexicans. And it's still killing people. Those guns are still out there, and they're still showing up. And there was never any, not one case made from the running of those guns. What it was, if you remember back to when Clinton and Obama were running, Clinton particularly was saying the gun violence in Mexico is due to American gun owners selling guns to cartels. And that was never true. There was a high percentage of them traced to America. And I did shows on this a long time ago, and that's because we have a good tracing system. But most of those sales were from the United States government to the GOM, to the government of Mexico, because again, that's the weapons trade. And then the government of Mexico would give them to the cartel leaders, because La Familia cartel had bought off the Mexican government. But the Sinaloa cartel, I found out, had bought off the United States government. And so I didn't even know what I had discovered at the time. It took me a long time to figure this out, and a lot of, emotional heartache along the way. But the ATF for the Obama administration was running gun south, and the DEA for the Sinaloa cartel was running drugs north. The FBI was running the hit team that got Brian. And then if you look at Benghazi, it's basically the same thing. It's a covert gun. If you remember the beginning of 13 Hours, you saw that, right? At the
Yeah, great
beginning,
movie.
the sad guys are what? They're buying guns back. Do you remember that
Mhm,
scene?
mhm.
At the beginning, they're buying guns back and they're buying stingers back because they're trying to collect up because Fast and Furious has blown up on them. And then the same thing happened in Syria. We spent $500 million for 5 guys who were pro US, $100 million a guy. And Trump finally put an end to that. That was all. And then if you look at Chaz and Chop, you see long guns come into Chaz and Chop or whatever you call it. The guy's opening the trunk. It's full of long guns. Where are those long guns coming from? Well, there's been weapon seizure parts coming from China, just like there's been counterfeit money, which is when you counterfeit somebody's currency, that's economic battle as well in unrestricted warfare.
You mentioned $100 million a guy for 5 guys. Could you explain that? Were you referring also to the Benghazi attacks and just the lack of security there?
No, that was, well, Benghazi was Ambassador Stevens wanted more security. They lessened his security. Everybody else had left. Everybody was getting attacked every day. And I believe and not just me, but there's generals and admirals that believe that was a setup so that Obama could do a trade. He eventually did that trade with that trader, that PFC that was finally convicted. I can't remember his name.
Not Manning, was it?
No. Manning was a traitor too, but the husband and wife were at the White House with Obama, and the husband was declaring in Arabic that this is Muslim land when he was at the podium. He finally got convicted. Like 6 soldiers died looking for him too, but he had actually gone over to the other side.
Okay.
But anyway, I've lost my. I don't even know where we were now. You'll have to bring me back.
I was just wondering about the $100 million a guy. That wasn't referring to.
So yeah. So we were trying to get so ISIS is Iraq and Syria, and we were trying to get pro-U.S. Anti-ISIS forces in Syria. Remember when Special Forces may still be in Syria trying to bring about, although Trump wants to get us out of there. And we were, and Hillary, as State Department head, was dropping arms and spending money on troops. And when the numbers finally came out for the $500 million we spent, we got 5 guys. You know how many guys I could train for $500 million? But because it's just like Obama flying $1 billion in unmarked cash in a private unmarked plane, no tail number plane into Iran. Well, Iran's the biggest sponsor of state terrorism. It's an easy story. It's just that the left propaganda press covers it up. It's easy. He's giving money to the terrorists to kill our troops.
Yeah. And as a former intelligence kind of professional, what are your thoughts on Edward Snowden? Because he just got recently vindicated by an appeals court, I think in New York. What are your thoughts on Ed Snowden and everything that transpired in 2013 up to today?
In the old days, I would have called him a traitor, but I don't know. I don't see any difference between reporters who have been precedent. You know what precedent is in a legal situation?
Legal precedent? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, legal precedent.
Okay.
So
maybe you could define that, Major Prather.
So there's civil law and there's criminal law. And so the government, like I did Title 21 USC 841 code, that was my one lane as a special agent. It's all criminal law. And that you go to jail. Civil law, a civilian brings that, and it's monetary. But there's precedent for both. And precedent is how a judge then takes that new law and then decides on it. And there's case law. And that's when attorneys go to court, is they weigh precedent. Everybody pulls out well, here's my precedent, here's your precedent. And then the jury or the judge decides precedent. So the precedent for somebody publishing, not stealing, because he didn't say he took it. He just published it. the precedent follows the precedent of news reporters. Everybody, Woodward, Bernstein, everybody falls under that same precedent. So I don't see how, if the courts were just, which they are not, they are totally corrupt and deep state, he should be the same as all these other reporters. Even with Flynn, somebody recorded, I know who it is. It's the deep state. It's NSA recorded Flynn on international calls. That's classified, and then leaked that. That's a felony, and they only leaked parts of it. And we still, and that's the same thing with Carmela and Schmidt and Shift leaking stuff as well. So if there was even-handed justice under the law, those same precedents, those same standards would apply. The reason they're not applying to Bannon and to them is because they're exposing the deep state.
How would you define the deep state, Major Prather?
So the deep state, like in the FBI, it's the 7th floor. It's the headquarters floor. And then the deep state is who really runs things, which is primarily the intelligence community. And, I was part of the intelligence community for decades. I had a blue badge. I walked in anywhere. And the Department of Justice to a lesser extent. And so you can really trace the beginnings of the deep state till after World War II. We win World War II, and the OSS, is the Office of Strategic Services, is disbanded. If you watch Captain America, all that Captain America, Iron Man stuff, that's really OSS stuff. It's not far off from the truth. Those guys were very, very brave and resourceful. And two things come out of the OSS: Army Special Forces, which I got to serve with. I'm wearing my regimental crest today. Although I was never on an A team, I was on a B team. And then the CIA. Special Forces, great stuff. Go into Afghanistan, wipe out the Taliban after 9/11. CIA shortly after that starts to manipulate intelligence and psychological operations. Think the Schmidt-Mundt Act. And also before that, the Office of Policy Management starts to come online. Think about Ted Kaczynski at Harvard, working for the CIA, where they make him the Unabomber. That's what they're doing now with all these Antifa people. What's his name? The guy on CNN, the white-haired guy.
Is that Don Lemon, or who is that?
No, not Don Lemon. The other guy, the white guy. I can't think of his name.
Yeah, I don't know his name.
He's been there forever. And where did he work before he worked at CNN?
Oh, Anderson Cooper. That's what
Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
Where did he work before?
Yeah, he was an intern, wasn't he? He was a CIA intern, right?
CIA intern.
Yeah.
And his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, with the Satanist demonic stuff and all the photos. But
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, look up the photos. But you look at her necklace, look at the little altar. Everybody says that stuff's a conspiracy theory, but start looking at the evidence. Look at the dinners where they got, cakes looking like human beings and heads coming out and the table. But the point is that we have a saying is little cases, little problems, big cases, big problems. Big cases are hard and difficult. No cases, no problems. So instead of working big cases, it's a lot easier to create cases. So what have we seen the FBI do in about 17 or 18 of the 22 or 23 Muslim terror cases? It's entrapment. They find some hapless young Muslim guy and they go, "Hey, you mad at America?" "Yeah, I'm mad at America, even though I'm here and it's better than where I was, but I'm mad at you want to blow something up?" "Yeah, sure." "You got any explosive?" "No." "Got any ammo?" "No." "Well, here, we'll give you some inert ammo. You got a target?" "No." "Well, here's a target." "You got a car?" "No." "Well, here's a car." And then they arrest him and they go, "Hey, we just wrapped up another terrorism," because that's a nice, clean case. And then they go, "Hey, our stats are good." And so the same thing applies with intelligence. So that if you want to do real intelligence work, you got to work hard. My peer and colleague, a better intelligence officer than I am, and I'm pretty good, Tony Schaefer at DIA, was in Operation Dark Heart, and he data mined Osama bin Laden. He figured it out. And what they do to him, the DIA did the same thing to him that the DEA did to me, because it made him look bad later. What about FBI Special Agent Williams in Arizona when these guys were out here learning how to fly planes and not land them? He wanted to investigate them. What was he told? No, don't do that. We're not interested in that. So that's the deep state. It's easier to control. It's not, I don't think it was Epstein controlling Maxwell. I think it was Maxwell controlling Epstein, and then Maxwell reporting back to Mossad. And we see that a lot with these terror couples that come in. These Americans go back to with Chechnya or whatever. They go back to get married. They come back with a Muslim wife. She's the handler. She's the case officer. And she's directing stuff, but they're the agent. Now, agent in intelligence terms, a case officer runs an agent. In law enforcement terms, a special agent runs a confidential source. They're basically the same thing. I've done both extensively. So that is what's going on there. That's where I think it's been happening.
Yeah, they did that with, I believe his name was Mohammed in Portland, Oregon, I think it was, with the entrapment. He was like a young, I think he was 18 or 17, and they got like two, pretty female agents to kind of, cast a spell over him in a way and entrap him, really seduce him to try to commit that crime. But I just want to,
and I'm not making an excuse for Muslim terrorism by any means.
No, of course not. No,
that's real. I'm just saying, if you're going to really work it, it's hard to work it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. And Israel, we've mentioned, but what are your thoughts on Israel? Because I agree that Maxwell was more powerful. She was the queen on the chessboard. But once the king was captured, the game was over. But Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, of course, is linked to Mossadi's Mossadation, and he played many different intelligence agencies off against each other and worked for them. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Israel in general? Because just of how much money we give them and the situation there with the Palestinians, what are your thoughts?
So, again, I'm generally pro-Israel because of the Judeo heritage. But, I was recently contacted by somebody I used to work with, and this person worked so there's a lot of, retired Delta Force Sergeant Majors and Dev Group Master Chiefs out there, but there's not too many of us who have worked in all those spaces, across the board and simultaneously like I did. And so I was contacted a while back by somebody I used to work with in this country and other countries on multiple levels. And I had heard about the Israeli art students in the towers, painting the explosives on there. And but I hadn't known that they had tried to breach DEA offices all over the country. And so I looked into that, and I'm not generally a conspiracy guy. I've been on other shows and they go, "What about the towers?" I'm like, as far as I know, planes flew into towers. I don't know that much about it. I talk about what I know. But now that I've looked into this, it's pretty clear that Israel definitely, and the deep state definitely, played a part in the 9/11 attacks to get the power and might of the United States on their side. Just like, and again, what I say is, I'm generally pro-Israel, but I'm not on Team Israel. I'm American. I'm on Team America, and you should be, and we should all be on Team America. Period. That's it. Israel only exists because of Team America. We liberated the Holocaust camps. And yes, I know the Russians liberated some too, but it was mainly us. And then we helped establish Israel. Israel doesn't lead the world. We should be leading the world. And we are coming back to that. So I'm on Team America, not on Team Israel. So, and if Mossad and Israel are doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, then I'm going to say they are. And so they are not the allies that they should be to us after everything we have done for them. Having said that, I think it has changed because under previous presidents, they didn't have the support they do now. Trump moved. Everybody had said they'd move the embassy to Jerusalem. Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. So, do they need to have an Epstein now, or do they need another false flag? No, they don't. So, I think another great thing that Trump has done that he doesn't get credit for is because the UAE agreement is historic. That's another Nobel Prize, as far as I'm concerned. Why? Because he's negotiating from a position of strength. He's like to the Palestinians, okay, you don't want to do anything? Okay, we'll do that. So he's always negotiating from a position of strength. And so now I think that is less likely to happen than before. Just like with defunding the police, you're going to get, when you defund the police, you're going to get worse cops. You're going to get poorly trained cops. And you're going to get, you're not going to get the best. It's just like, NFL players, although I could care less about grown men playing kids games, but you get the better players if you pay the money. The real heroes are there are soldiers and sailors and cops and nurses and teachers, and they should have the pay edge. That the exact opposite has happened. That like with George Floyd, I think that looks very much to me like he was an informant, and that was a gang of corrupt cops, and I believe they were doing counterfeiting operations for China.
Wow, that is that's a big one you just dropped on us there, Major Prather. And Jeffrey Prather has 2 books: "Boys Are Born, Men Are Trained." It's called Initiation, and then "Chase Terror on the Border," where he uses his experiences as a DEA agent on the southwestern border of the United States with Mexico to write a story. He's got 5 stars on Amazon, and those links are in the description box below, people, as well as Major Prather's email if anybody wants to get in touch with him, and his website where he hosts his show. And you just, I guess it was last month, you lost your radio show, didn't you?
They canceled me. They said I was racist. Yeah.
Yeah, because
my Japanese teachers, I have a Japanese martial arts teacher, Apache. I was on a black conservative radio show for a long time, and a Hispanic radio show, so I'm racist.
Yeah, you got canceled there, Major Prather, and that was because you criticized BLM, right, or something to that effect.
I said that Black Lives Matter, because what about the 20 million black babies that have been aborted by the founder who wanted to abort and control black populations? It's only about a couple of black criminals, because Floyd was a criminal. All these guys that they're defending are criminals. And it's really a psychological setup for one big criminal, which is former President Obama. And so that was racist.
I just want to read something here that Major Prather wrote. "The news is fake. The polls are fixed. The pundits lie. The politicians cheat. The swamp is deep. The enemy desperate. They push fear, hate, death, and ignorance. And in their ignorance, they mistake force for power. Power is not forced. Intimidation is not inspiration. Power and inspiration come from God. God is not with us, but we are with God. The enemy denies God, and so in the end, they will be powerless." Jeffrey Prather is a retired SOCOM soldier, DIA intelligence collector, and ex-DEA special agent. Before we sign off today, Mr. Prather, I just wanted to thank you once again for coming on my show. I really am appreciative of it. I'm going to mirror it on all my channels, and I would love to do this again. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the chat, I'm staying at my colleague Shrimp Zoo's house. He's another YouTuber. He's got about 15K, and he's actually in the building right now. And if you would want to do a chat with us at some point, or just Shrimp, here he is. This is Shrimp Zoo. Yeah, he's a YouTuber. He's got about 15,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Wow, I only got like 2.
Yeah, and he's been shadow banned too by what we believe to be the deep state. So yeah,
welcome to the club.
Yeah, we love to have you on our show sometime if you'd be up for it.
Yeah, sure. And I'm still on YouTube, but I want to say before we finish that you young whippersnappers, I'm really happy because you're gonna get the country that you deserve, and you're gonna get the government you tolerate. So it's really important. I'm out. I'm retired. Tag, you're it. It's your turn. And so what you're doing as citizen journalist is so important to get the word out and talk to your peerage and talk to everybody, because you get what you tolerate. And you guys got a big job ahead of you. But I'm really proud of you guys for what you're doing. I'm not trying to be patronizing. I really mean that sincerely.
No, yeah, we accept that in the most gracious way possible, Major Prather. We definitely, I think, both feel grateful to learn from someone like you with so much experience on both sides now of being a citizen journalist and reporter and media agency, as well as being on the inside as a government agent in all those facets. So yeah, nothing but gratitude here, Mr. Prather. Any final thoughts before we sign off? I know you got your books that you want to push, and I will be buying both and reading them.
Oh, cool. Good.
Yeah, before long, I'm gonna do some book reviews on that. I've been doing book reviews recently, just catching up on those as well. But yeah, anything final plugs you want to do before we sign off, Mr. Prather?
No, just don't be intimidated. Don't let them intimidate you. That's all. And if you stand up, others will stand up. Others will follow.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeffrey Prather, for speaking with me today. I'd love to do it again sometime, as I said before. Stay frosty, people. Shout out to all my patriots worldwide. This has been a chat with Jeffrey Prather. And until next time, folks.